Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our session today, our live immigration Q&A. This session is being hosted by Devant, a subsidiary of Academica. For over 20 years, they are the largest company providing research and consulting expertise to colleges and universities. Academica actually started Devant to help international students and graduates get hired in Canada. The word devant in French literally means to be in front of. So we believe that our services and our resources will bring students in front of their journey to stay, work, and succeed in Canada. So just a few housekeeping items, just to let you know. All participants have been muted, so there's no need to use your video. You should be able to hear the session. Please maybe make a note in the chat that you can hear fine. And if you have any questions, please use the Q&A feature. I will be monitoring the Q&A for questions in the chat just in case you're having any technical difficulties. So just to let you know, I will be moderating the session. I'm so pleased to be here today. My name is Sisha Maharaj, and I'm a senior consultant with Devant. I also lead business development and employee relations with KB Technologies, which is now a joint venture with Devant, to expand our end-to-end solutions for students and our higher education partners to be successful in helping students in their career outcomes in Canada. So I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce to you our guest speaker, Elizabeth Long. Elizabeth is a leading immigration lawyer and advocate for immigrants and refugee rights. She holds a Juris Doctor Law degree from the University of Toronto and a Bachelor of Arts with honors and psychology from Memorial University in Newfoundland. She also holds a Master's of Law degree from Osgoode Hall Law at York University, where she focused on the intersection between immigration and labor and employment law for foreign workers. She's certified by the Law Society of Ontario as a specialist in citizenship and immigration law. It is a prestigious list which only approximately 65 lawyers in Canada belong to. So Elizabeth, thank you so much for spending this evening, this hour with us today. We are so happy to have you leading this session. I'll pass the floor to you, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much. It's fantastic to be here with you all today. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go through my slides, and then we're going to have a Q&A session at the end. Now, if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen, and we will try to get to as many questions as we can at the end. Okay. All right. So there has just been a plethora of announcements for students over the last couple of months. Just wanted to quickly go over some of the big ones. So first of all, there is a cap. This year, at least at first they said 360,000, and then they said, oh, okay, now it's just recently, last week, they said 606,000 cap for study permits. And that doesn't include master's, PhD, grade schools, and study permit extensions in Canada. So if you're in Canada and you want to apply to extend your study permit, you're not going to be included in that cap. Now, students, if you applied for a study permit as of December 7th, you can work full-time until the end of the semester, April 30th. No more extensions of postgrad work permits. So there were some temporary policies last year and for a few years before, when they were allowing students to extend their postgrad work permits for 18 months. They have said, we're not doing it this year. We're not doing it again. So just be aware that's not going to happen. You have one postgrad work permit and that's it. Okay. Now, the new announcement is there are no more spousal work permits for students who are not master's or PhD students. Now, if you have a spouse and they already have a spousal work permit, they can continue with that work permit and they can extend it as well. But for those people who don't have work permits, they're not going to be able to continue on getting those work permits. The master students, irrespective of the length of your program, you're really going to be able to get 3-year work permits. The financial means test has gone up a lot, and there are now quite a lot of administrative hurdles for applicants. We're going to need a new provincial attestation letter before we can apply for study permits from outside of Canada. If you're inside Canada, you don't need that to file an extension, okay? And then the schools, they also have to provide confirmations of the letters of acceptance as well. And the public-private partnership college programs, they're no longer going to be eligible for postgrad work permits. Now, if you are already in one of these programs, you can still get your postgrad work permits, but new students coming in won't be able to get the postgrad work permits for these kind of programs. I mean, why is the government doing this? What does this really mean for students? So if you're already in Canada, a lot of these provisions don't really apply to you. The master students, the good news is for master students, you can get the 3-year postgrad work permit. If you're already in Canada, the old rules still apply for your extensions, spousal work permits, postgrad work permits, okay? But it does really affect new students coming in. There's a cap, the financial requirement is raised, spousal work permit restrictions, provincial attestations required. So quite a lot for new students who are coming in. And really, why is this government doing this? It's because of the numbers. There's just too many students now in the system compared to the number of permanent residence spots that are available. If you're looking at the numbers, last year, there were approximately 900,000 international students and 700,000 international workers in Canada. And there are only 281,000 spots for economic streams for permanent residents, 110,000 for express entry, and another 110,000 for PNP. So that's going to be the majority of spots. But compared to how many workers are in Canada, not to mention students, how many workers are in Canada that are ready, many of them, to apply for permanent residence, we are looking at just 1/3 of the workers who are going to be able to get permanent residence this year. So the first thing I wanted to look over and look at strategies is how you might be able to extend a work permit beyond the postgrad work permit. This is important for those people whose postgrad work permits may expire, but it's also important for those people who may need some extra points to get arranged employment as well for express entry, okay? So normally you only get one postgrad work permit in your lifetime, right? So especially this year, the government has already said they're not going to offer those extension programs like they did in the last year or so. So what are you going to do? You have to now qualify for a work permit in another way. Here are some of the ways. LMIAs, labor market impact assessment. This is where if you have an employer, they would have to apply to Service Canada, the Labor Department. They have to normally first try to recruit Canadians and show that they can't find a Canadian to do the job. And then they can apply for the LMIA. The wages, the salary also needs to meet the median wage level. So in some respects, this could prove, on both respects, the recruitment issue and also the wage issue could prove to be a problem for many international graduates, because if you're coming in at entry level, you don't have specialized expertise, that's an issue. Now, there is a special LMIA called the Global Talent Stream. That one is one for STEM workers. And this one, the employer does not need to recruit Canadians. That's the part that they tend to hate the most, is where they have to recruit Canadians and do the advertising. This one, they don't need to do that, okay? But your occupation has to be on a list of STEM workers. So a lot of the IT workers, we have some engineers as well. If you're on that list, then instead of having to recruit Canadians, the employers, they can sign a labor market benefit plan where they say, oh, I'm going to be hiring Canadians in the future. I'm going to be training Canadians, etc. Okay. And they go through the Global Talent Stream. Processing time for the government is only 2 weeks at that time. There are also a lot of free trade professional work permits. So if you're a national of certain countries that have free trade agreements with Canada, for example, Mexico, Peru, Colombia, United States, EU, UK, where else? Australia, Japan. So there are all sorts of countries that have free trade agreements with Canada, where if you have a job offer as a certain professional, and depends on the free trade agreement, you may be able to apply for a work permit that is LMIA exempt, but it's employer specific. If you speak French to a certain level, you can also get work permits as long as the job is outside of Quebec. The job itself does not have to require French. It's just that you yourself have to be fluent up to the CLB 5 level. Provincial nomination work permits. So these are work permits where you already have provincial nomination, and then you're waiting for the permanent residence to be issued. You can apply for work permits based on the provincial nomination. Bridging work permits. These are work permits where it's similar to the provincial nominee work permits. You have been invited, or you have applied for your your permanent residence, and you're waiting for your work permit. For example, if you have you've been invited to apply for express entry, you've applied for express entry, you can then apply to extend your work permit, and they usually issue it for 1 year at a time while waiting for your express entry application to be decided. And that's an open work permit as well. Okay. So these are some of the work permits. There are a lot of other work permits as well for different situations. These are some of the more relevant ones for most students. So people often ask me, well, I just want to get another work permit. You can't just get another work permit. You really need to qualify under one of these few categories. Okay, let's talk a little bit about express entry. For those who don't know, here's a brief overview about how express entry works. So to start, you have to create an online profile, and you qualify under one of 3 categories: the Federal Skilled Worker class, Canadian Experience class, or the Federal Skilled Trades class. After you qualify, you can get into the express entry pool. Now, when you're in the express entry pool, you have not yet applied for permanent residence yet, okay? You're just in the pool, and you are saying to the government, hey, I qualify, and I would like to apply. Now, when you get into the pool, you get a series of points based on your background. If you have provincial nomination, you get 600 points. But every couple of weeks, the government will have a draw where they invite certain people to apply, okay? And if you get the invitation to apply, it's only then that you can actually submit your application. So, the express entry is not a lottery. It's more akin to skimming the cream. The government will announce the numbers for the top, let's say 2,000, 3,000, however many they want to invite. And they also have things like category-based draws, which we will talk about afterwards, okay? So it's only if you are invited to apply that you get to apply. So, as many of you know, express entry has been extraordinarily high in the past year or so. The last draw was at the 540s and probably might drop a little bit, but it likely what will remain quite high, probably at around the 500s, I would say, given the amount of people who want to apply. It's really a competition. And the more people that are in the pool, the more inventory builds up, the thicker the cream gets, okay? And so one of the ways that may help you get 50 extra points is through arranged employment. So arranged employment has some specific criteria that you need to have in order to have those 50 arranged employment points. First of all, you cannot get arranged employment if you only have a post-grad work permit. Post-grad work permits are open work permits. You do not qualify for arranged employment, even if you have a job offer just with a post-grad work permit. If you have an LMIA, okay, and certain LMIAs, you just need the LMIA, you get 50 points. Other LMIAs, you will need to get a work permit based on the LMIA. Then you can get 50 points for arranged employment for most occupations. If it is at the executive management level, you can get 200 points. Then if you have the other employer-specific work permits that I talked about, it's called the IMP. So for example, free trade agreement, francophone, certain kinds of work permits, then and you have 1 year of work experience with that employer, then you can get then you can qualify for arranged employment. Now, the length of your position is also important. It can be permanent, but at least it also needs to be, the very least, it should be at least 18 months from the date of application. Because what the requirement is that you have that job offer for at least 1 year after you get permanent residence. So if express entry takes 6 months, then 18 months, 18 plus 12, 12 plus 6 is what you will need to have. Okay, certainly if it's permanent, that's great, but at least 18 months. And of course, the job has to be high skilled. Now, there are also other kinds of jobs that will help you give you an advantage for express entry. And those are things that are in the category-based draws. So starting in the summer last year, the government started with these category-based draws where they will only invite people that are in certain categories to apply. And if the pool then shrinks by a lot, then you're only competing with people in that category, then the numbers go down by a lot, okay? So for example, there is one called the French language proficiency one. So people who have a CLB of 7 in French, for example, you can be invited for that, okay? Healthcare occupations, there's special draws for that, special draws for STEM occupations, trades, transport, like truck drivers, for example, agriculture, agri-food, and those, I've put a link here. We'll be sharing these slides for you guys afterwards. Okay, so if you're thinking about express entry and you're looking for jobs, you're wondering which job would help me get permanent residence, take a look at some of these categories. If you're able to get a job in one of those occupations, or if you only have 6 months of work experience in these occupations, maybe in the past, in the last 3 years, then you could get invited to apply. If you're in Ontario, there are also OIMP express entry streams that can help you. Okay, now in Ontario, in other provinces have other kinds of systems. Every province has their own provincial nominee program. I'm just going to talk about Ontario today just for the sake of time. But certainly if you're at other provinces, we can also look at other provinces as well. Okay, so in Ontario, there are certain streams where you can get 600 points if you're invited to apply. Okay, now are you invited to apply? You can't just apply directly to the government. You have to just be in the express entry pool. You indicate that you might like to live in Ontario, and then the government would issue you a notification of interest in the express entry pool if they're interested in you. So who are they interested in? The first one is something where the government tends to it's the most broad. You have to have a bachelor's degree to qualify. And then they recently, in the last few years, have been inviting people in certain occupations. So for example, tech occupations, or healthcare occupations, or maybe trades occupations. Okay, so, well, the trades are another one, but this is more, what we've seen lately is healthcare, some management consultants, some tech draws, etc. Okay. They also might have something for French speakers as well. And then the trades. And for the trades, there's a special skilled trades draw. You have to have at least 1 year of work experience in Ontario in one of the specified trades in the last 2 years. Okay, this one you don't have to have a bachelor's degree, but you have to have a valid Ontario work permit to work in Ontario. Okay. Okay, so let's move away from express entry. Let's talk about some other kinds of provincial nominee programs. As you can see, there were around 110,000 spots for express entry. There's also another 110,000 spots for provincial nominee programs. And provincial nominee programs are programs where the federal government has made an agreement with every province to allow each province to decide for themselves who they want to stay in their province. Okay, and so each province, they will very jealously guard their positions and their selections for those people who want to live in that province, because they only have so many spots, and if you are residing in another province and you want to apply for a different province, you will have a hard time getting it approved unless you can very convincingly show why it is that how it is that you are going to be living in in that particular province. Okay, most of the time we will advise someone, if they want to apply for a provincial nominee program, to move to that province, especially if you're going to be in Canada. If you're outside of Canada, you don't have a work permit, then that's an issue, then that's different. But if you're in Canada, make sure that you stay in that province until you get your permanent residence, all the way until the end. Because even if you have a provincial nomination, then you apply for permanent residence with the federal government. While you're applying for the federal government, if you move out of the province, your application could be denied. Okay. Okay, so there are different kinds of provincial nominee programs. There are provincial nominee programs that are express entry linked, and there are provincial nominee programs that are not express entry linked. So this is an Ontario program for employer-specific, for employer-based streams that are completely separate from express entry. So if you apply under this stream, you don't apply afterwards for express entry. If you are nominated and you pass the Ontario examination, then you apply directly for permanent residence with the federal government. The kicker is applying with the federal government can take a long time, much longer time than express entry, maybe a year and a half or so. Okay, whereas express entry, you get it in 6 months normally. This provincial nominee program, you're looking at around 2 years, including the Ontario provincial nominee program examination, etc. Okay. So how this works is, first, you have to enter into a pool. It's not the express entry pool, it's the OIMP pool. And it depends on which stream you are going to apply under as to how many points you get, okay? Because certain, for example, if you're going to apply for the foreign worker stream, your education doesn't matter for that one. You don't get points for that, okay? Whereas if you are going to apply under a student stream, then education really does matter. Some of the things that you need to understand is where you study and where you have a job offer. That matters for points. So for example, if you study and had a job offer in Northern Ontario, you would get the most points compared to if you're studying in Toronto, proper Toronto, you get 0 points compared to Northern Ontario, we get 10 points. Okay, so that could make a big difference. Now the draws happen several times a year. And it's, you know, there's no predictions. Like federal government, every 2 weeks or so, there might be a draw. Ontario government, sometimes a few months, there's no draw. And then suddenly within, you know, a week, there are several draws. Okay. There are no announcements beforehand that there is a draw, just a draw happens and that's it. So the way to do this is just put yourself into the pool as early as possible. So there are 3 employer-based streams, and let's talk about that now. There's also a master's and PhD stream as well for students who graduate from master's or PhDs in Ontario. No job offer is required, but you do have to get a scoring based on your background. And those people who study as far away from Toronto as, you know, then your points increase. So, so here's how the employers work. So if you're inside the GTA, your employer has to have a gross income of at least $1 million, be in business for at least 3 years, and have at least 5 full-time employees. If you are outside of the GTA, gross income is over 500,000, have been in business for 3 years, and they have to have at least 3 Canadians or permanent resident employees. Okay, the job offer has to be full-time and permanent. Now, the first one is that if you're an international student stream. So with the international student stream, there's an advantage in that you don't need to have any work experience to qualify. And the salary can just meet the entry-level wage, which is much, much easier to meet than the median wage, okay? But you have to have a graduated from either a 2-year program or a 1-year postgraduate programs. And Ontario has recently updated this to be, if it's an Ontario postgraduate certificate program, then you can qualify if it's 1 year. Now, you have to apply within 2 years of your graduation. So that means that you have to be selected, not just be in the pool, selected and apply. There's another one where it doesn't matter about graduating from a program, but you have to have at least 2 years of work experience and your salary needs to meet median wage. And then the third one is the in-demand stream. The in-demand stream is the one that is something where it is a low-skilled occupations. Everything else is high-skilled. This one's a low-skilled occupations, but it's not any low-skilled occupations. You have to be on the list for the low-skilled occupations. And if you have worked for 9 months for an employer in Ontario, then you can qualify for that. Another program we can talk about is a Rural and Northern Immigration Pilot, the RNIP program. And a lot of programs are in there. And you have to have qualifying work experience or graduation from eligible study programs. The main thing is you need to have a qualifying job offer in the community, okay? And all of you guys will meet the language benchmarks. You have to work in Canada or have settlement funds. The main thing is we really need to have a qualifying job offer from the community, and the community needs to recommend you for these programs. There's a similar program called the AIP, Atlantic Immigrant Program, where it's a similar situation for people who go to the Atlantic provinces. There's another one called the Caregiver Program. This is one where you are employed by a family, not by an agency, but by a family to take care of the children, elderly, or disabled people in their home. Now, there is a quota for the people who are applying under the children category, and there's a quota for people who are applying under the elderly or disabled person category. The quota for the caregiver for children fills up within maybe the first hour, okay, in the beginning of the year when they open it. For the other ones, for the elderly and disabled, it takes a few months to fill out. So I would highly recommend, and you can do this because if you're on Open Work Permits, you can do whatever you want. So if this is something that you would like to do, go and try to take care of someone who is elderly or disabled in their home. And if you have 1 year of work experience in that way, you have at least a 1 year post-secondary education, you meet the CLB benchmark of 5, then you will qualify to apply for permanent residence under this category. Finally, I just wanted to touch base on the startup visa. We're going to have a program for Devant on the 28th of February, I believe, where we're going to talk about entrepreneur options. And this is an entrepreneurial option that, there are other ones that some of you might think about doing. So the startup visa is something where up to 5 founders can apply together to start a business. And each of the founders must own at least 10% of the company, with everyone, all of the applicants together owning at least 50% of the business. Okay, so it's not something that you go into business with a Canadian who owns the majority of the business. It's the people who are applying for permanent residence under this program. You can have up to 5, you can have just yourself, or you can have your friends, but everybody who is applying, that you guys have to own the majority of the business. The business has to be accepted by a designated organization, incubator, angel investor group, venture capital group. And each of the founders must be able and willing to manage the business. Each person has to have at least a CLB level of 5. So for example, you can, go into it with people, who are not in Canada. Okay, but each of them still must be able and willing to manage the business. And it's not just, you don't just need one kind of person to manage a business. For example, let's say you have an innovative IT company. Okay, great. So you have somebody who is there to be the CTO, to develop the product. You will also need someone who has experience managing operations of the business. Another one who's experienced in finances, another one in marketing, okay? And so you can have people from different backgrounds come together to manage the business. But each one has to be able and willing to do so. And for people who don't have a work permit yet, if they're outside of Canada or if your postgrad work permit is going to expire, you can actually apply for a work permit while waiting for the permanent residence. The PR for this has been speeding up. Before, during COVID, it was, 2-3 years. Now it's more around a year and a half or so that we're starting to get PR applications being looked at and being approved. All right, so we have, talked a lot about a lot of things. Here's some things to keep in mind, okay? First of all, it's all about planning now. The math is there. Only 1/3 of spots available now for the number of workers there. So it's those people who plan ahead of time that are going to have the advantage to knowing what to do, okay? After that, you need to do maybe you're going to study some more, maybe you're going to get a job in a certain field. Maybe you need to study more for the IELTS. Carrying out the plan may not be easy, but you have to have the determination to do so. Make sure you stay in status. Don't misrepresent your situation, okay? There is going to be more and more of a temptation now to go and, do the easy way out. Maybe somebody has told you, hey, we can help you out. You don't need to know how, just pay us a lot of money and we will submit all sorts of documents that are not there. We will misrepresent your work experience, misrepresent this, misrepresent that. First of all, the immigration officers are not stupid. They will be looking at catching these kind of things. And if they do catch you, then you could be barred from Canada for up to 5 years, okay? Also, even if you get through your PR, you might be always look behind your shoulders because a lot of these kind of businesses, they are caught afterwards and then their client lists come out and they can come and take away not only your permanent residence, they can take away your citizenship for misrepresenting as well, okay? So do it the right way and then you can sleep easily. You don't have to be constantly worried about someone coming and taking away your status. If your application is rejected, hopefully you do it right from the beginning. You hire a good lawyer to go from the beginning. If you don't, and you do it yourself or you hire somebody who's bad and your application is rejected, do not wait. Go and hire a lawyer, a good lawyer right away and talk to them about what you can do. We are going to be seeing more and more rejections as the number of applications are there. And if you are lucky enough to have been selected, you have to do everything perfectly. But still, there are a lot of human errors with the officers. So first of all, federal court notice period is only 15 days if the application is decided inside Canada. Outside is 60 days. If you pass this period, you give up your right to go to federal courts. Even if you say, okay, I don't want to go to court, I want to have a reconsideration. And you call the call center and they say, okay, no problem, we'll put in a note for you. And you think that's it. That is not it, because most of the time, the officers, you don't know what to say. You don't know what to tell them. They will just, not bother, and they can take their own time or they can just reject it right out. And then after that, if you want to go to a lawyer like me and say, hey, now can you help me do a reconsideration? I would say, it's too late because you only have one chance to file a reconsideration, okay? There's a lot of other things, timelines that come into play. If you miss those timelines, then you're also out of luck, like restoration of status, etc. Okay? So those are some things to keep in mind. All right, let's get to some questions here.
Wow, Elizabeth, thank you. Thank you so much for this really informative session. And thank you everyone for your questions. We have almost 20 questions in the queue, so I'm going to ask you them now so that we can try to get to as many people as possible. And for those who are not able to get to, Elizabeth has her contact information, so please take down her contact information so that you can reach out to her directly.
Yes,
So
and
Elizabeth,
I
here we
also
go.
wanted to let you guys know, we do a lot of social media posts of new updates, and we do a lot of videos as well. This is our social media stuff. Email, if you want to do a consultation, email us, and we'll put you in touch with a lawyer who can go through your situation. The consultations, tell us you're coming from Devant, and we will give you a special student rate. It's only $100 if you're coming from Devant as well. And
Wow.
also we have a newsletter. So if you want to sign up for the newsletter, we don't advertise or whatever on the newsletter. It's just a way for us to tell you about important information that may affect you. So that's on our website as well. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you, Elizabeth. And thank you for your generosity of the discount for students who are working with us or that are part of our partner school network. Thank you so much. So first question, From Monica, thank you for your question. She says, I'll be completing my first program this coming April. I'll be taking my second program this coming September. Will I be affected by the new legislation, or will I be eligible for a 3-year post-grad work permit?
So the post-grad work permits, the length of the post-grad work permits have not been changed yet, okay? Except if it's a private-public partnership program. Everything else is the same, except there's an advantage for master's students. All the master's students are getting 3-year post-grad work permits. Now, with regard to applying for the second program, if you are in Canada and you're applying for a second program, you're not affected by the cap, and you don't need the provincial attestation letter. So you're pretty good. It's still under the old rules for the second program.
Awesome. Okay, great. So we have another question here. What options are available to master's student who got a 1-year post-grad work permit approval just last week, given that the 3 years would be approved automatically from February 15th?
What options are, who got a 1-year, 3 years?
So what options are available to master's students?
That's a good question. So this person had applied for the post-grad work permit, and just got the 1 year for post-grad instead of waiting until after the date when you get 3-year.
When you get 3 years.
Yeah, you may not be able to extend it any further because it may have been just before that cutoff time. You know, we can wait to see if there are further instructions for that, but you may not be able to do it. So in that case, you really need to still think about, okay, I have my postgrad work permit for 1 year. What do I need to do in order to get permanent residence that way?
Wow, okay. So you've got 1 year, might have missed that window. And how do they verify this? Would they be able to come speak with you, Elizabeth, or what's the best way to get the
Yeah, I
answer
mean,
on
we
this?
can talk about a plan for that, but
Okay.
I mean, a lot of these kind of announcements, we kind of have to wait until they announce it, but does not look like from the announcements that they're retroactively applying them to people who receive their work permits before the February 15th cutoff date. So
Okay.
they may have missed that window. Yeah.
I may have missed that. Okay, so that's good to know. Thank you so much. So we have a question here from Abby. Abby's currently pursuing an 8-month international business graduate certificate, which has an additional 7 weeks of unpaid work placement component. After this, Abby is looking to do a 1-year international business certificate program, pursuing an 8-month healthcare aid program. And an 8-month healthcare aid program. So another 1 year and another 8-month after this. Will completing these 2 programs give me a 3-year post-grad work permit?
Likely, yes. For these kind of post-grad lengths, it doesn't look like they have changed other than for the master's students.
Okay, wonderful. All right, thank you. Some good news for Abby there. We have an anonymous question. Can I apply for PR with ONIP if I complete studying in Ontario but work in Alberta?
No. The OIMP is an Ontario provincial nominee program. So if you're going to go and work in Alberta, don't apply for the Ontario provincial nominee program. Look at what the provincial nominee program is in Alberta.
Okay, thank you. I know you mentioned a little bit about the working and studying in different provinces earlier as well. So that's a good question for that content. Okay, another student is asking, I'm currently a graduate student and I brought my husband and children. When I graduated and apply for the post-grad work permit, can my husband get an open work permit too?
Yes, for the post-grad work permit, they can. They have not limited spousal work permits for post-grad work permit holders. So yes, for the post-grad work permit, it does look like they can. So far, who knows? All these kind of things do change, but for now, that's still the case.
Okay, great. You mentioned this a little bit, but Harsh is asking about, does a student starting a proprietary business have a different pathway such as startup visa? So I think you answered this one.
Well, if you have your own business, you could do a startup visa, but there are other ways that you may be able to qualify for permanent residence. We're gonna do a whole webinar. You should come to that one on the 28th, if you're looking to start your own business and looking at the pathways, because oftentimes, for express entry, for example, self-employed work does not count for points for Canadian work experience. On the other hand, we may be able to get you an entrepreneur work permit where you can then have arranged employment points. So we really need to plan that out and weigh the cost and benefits of you starting your own business compared to you finding a job elsewhere, for permanent residents especially.
Thank you. Asan is asking, as an Iranian, is it a good decision to change my study permit to an open work permit? If yes, how much time do I have to find a professional job? And what should I have? Well, I guess it depends. It depends in terms of the what should I have, but
Yeah.
do you have any thoughts around that? Changing the study permit to an open work
Yeah.
permit?
Yeah, I mean, if you can, you don't have to change it from a study permit. You can hold a work permit and a study permit at the same time. And especially if you're Iranian, you might want to apply for that 3-year work permit before the deadline. That's something that's really good to have. And then when you graduate, you may be able to apply for your postgrad work permit at that point as well. If you have the Iranian work permit, you can work full-time as well based on the Iranian work permit while you are studying as well. So there are different advantages to different things, but certainly these kind of humanitarian work permits, they're limited, but they are very good to apply for people who qualify for them.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a question here around postgrad work permit extensions, Elizabeth.
Mm-hmm.
It seems that the government wants the PR process to be tougher for those who can only afford a 1-year postgraduate program. Recently, OINP was 78, which is almost impossible for anyone who did a 1-year course. A lot of us who graduated in summer of 2023 are still struggling to get a job. Any thoughts on that or options?
Yeah, I mean, the Ontario programs, in the last, they are looking. We have been asked to make a lot of submissions on these kind of on these kind of for OIMP on what to do next. I think they're struggling because there are only so many spots available and there's so many people who are applying. I think you guys should, if you're looking for a job, you should look at some of these occupations and demand streams. Think outside the box. Just because you have a business degree doesn't mean you can't do something in the trades. It doesn't mean you can't be a caregiver. You're not limited to doing work that is related to your studies. That is a misconception out there. Okay. So if you can get a job in something that will help you get PR, you might want to go and do that, because if PR is the primary goal, I mean, if you can't stay in Canada, you can't really continue to work in Canada. So if that's something that you want to do, think outside of the box and look at what the government is looking for to get PR.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Christy's asking, can an undergraduate program applicant apply for their children to join them on a temporary resident visa? And could spouses come on a visitor visa if they agree not to work?
Yes, technically speaking, they can. Depends on, whether or not you can show that you have enough funds to support them if your spouse is not working. How much savings do you have to support your family?
Okay. Monica's asking, have they announced the extension of RNIP?
I have not heard yet about the extension, but I am assuming that they will move forward with that. I haven't really heard any news that they're not going to move forward with that. When I don't hear news that they're not gonna, I'm assuming that it's going to be extended, but I'm just a lawyer. I wouldn't know.
Elizabeth, thanks for your honesty and for giving us the updated information. Um, Another student is asking, I'm applying for the post-grad work permit this September. Is it possible to do another course part-time or full-time during this time?
Uh, you're applying for another program, so you can do part-time, you can do like a program if you have status in Canada without a study permit if it's under 6 months. So you know, if you wanted to do a program that's under 6 months, you're free to do that without a study permit.
Okay, that's great to know.
Mhm.
Obada is asking, I will graduate from a mental health and addiction program next September from a public college in Northern Ontario. Since
Mhm.
it is only a 1-year graduate certificate, am I eligible only for ONIP, not RNIP?
So the RNIP, if you wanted to not have work experience and apply under the RNIP, they do require a 2-year program. Um, if you have a master's, it's okay, but a postgrad certificate, you need a 2-year program. If you want to bypass that work experience, you can still apply for the RNIP if you have work experience that qualifies for the RNIP, you know, and the job offer, of course, in the community.
Okay, thank you. Is it possible to continue residing in Ontario because I have a job for a while, say a year, if my spouse got a PNP to Saskatchewan and it's still processing?
Hmm. That's interesting. So your spouse has a PNP in Saskatchewan, you're in Ontario. Well, really depends on the situation. If you're able to convince the officer that your spouse is willing to be in Saskatchewan, and then maybe it can go through. That's more on a case by case basis. For the most part, at least the applicant should be in that province.
Okay, okay.
Mhm.
We have someone says, thanks for organizing such a valuable session. Thank you so much for your feedback. I'd like to confirm if there are any changes under the new policy for postgrad work permit. So if a student chooses a 1+1 postgraduate program for study in Canada, already started the academics this January 2024, how many years of postgrad work permit will the students be eligible for? Especially when the student enrolled in the college with a private public college partnership.
Hmm.
So they've already started, they're in Canada. It
Yeah,
started January 2024.
yeah. So if you're already in the program, you should be okay to get the postgrad work permit. Um, if you're not already in the program for the second program, and the second program is the public private one, that could be an issue. But if the second one that you're doing is and you're already in there, then that should be okay.
Okay. For international students with a spouse 45 years old, what are the chances of getting PR before the postgrad work permit expires?
Yeah.
The OWP is a Canadian technician at the moment.
Okay, so we really need for you to come and do a consultation with us.
Okay.
And we need to take a look at that. Yeah.
Okay. So that's a very personal consultation conversation. So please reach out to Elizabeth, and then she can help you talk that through.
Mhm.
There's a lot of questions. I'm trying to get through them, Elizabeth. Just reading to see which ones.
Yeah, so
Okay.
I mean, I'll say this, you know, a lot of times every situation is different. I wouldn't be able to tell you just from, you know, a couple of sentences or so, you know, what your options are. Really, we normally sit down with you for at least half an hour to go through your situation, go through your goals, go understand what it is that is your circumstances in order for us to give you a plan. And sometimes the plan is not just one plan. It's not just we have a plan A, plan B, plan C. If this happens, what happens? You know, if this happens, what happens? And oftentimes, maybe you don't qualify, or you know, you need to do something, and that's fine. That's good. Come for consultation early, so at least you know what you need to do in order to get there.
Mhm. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. So I know we're running out of time. Thank you everyone for your questions. We still have quite a bit in the queue. So I think that at this point, for those of you who just joined, we will be sharing the presentation on YouTube. And I just want to ask you, if you don't mind, maybe just sending us a little bit of your feedback if you found this was useful and if we should continue to do some of these sessions. Please sign up on menti.com and you'll see the QR code, and you'll also see the code here. So we would love your feedback. I just have a few questions on our session today. So the first question is, what topics did you find most useful? Understanding pathways to long-term employment, the new IRC changes for postgrad work permit, the postgrad work permit for public-private partnerships, understanding what is happening for work following studies, clarifying the numbers, or understanding my work eligibility. So if you could just take a few moments to provide us some of your feedback. That would be great. The next question is, what was your main takeaway today? So again, go to menti.com and the code is there at the top. Would love your feedback. And the code, someone is asking for the code. The feedback is the code is 4754250. So we're getting some responses here, the different options that's available to get PR. Thank you so much. Any other comments? What was your most valuable takeaway today? Please let us know. Thank you for your feedback that I need to work in Ontario to qualify for ONIP. Correct. All these acronyms, right?
Mm-hmm.
Great, we've got some more feedback coming, that I need to have a plan, keep abreast of immigration changes, and be prepared to pivot when needed. I am better informed on the ways to extend my work permit. Wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
We really appreciate your feedback on these questions. It helps us to plan and, work out future sessions for you. Main takeaway, I'm eligible for the postgrad work permit and the OWP for my spouse. That's great news. Give you some more time to fill out those questions. That's wonderful feedback. Was there anything missing for you? What topics do you need more help with? Please let us know so that this will help us to sort of curate the future topics. Also, I know we didn't get to all of your questions. We ended up having maybe almost 30 questions in the queue, Elizabeth.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully you can reach out to Elizabeth, if you've got specific questions about your own case or your own needs, that would be really great. So topics you need more help with. I don't have to work in the field I went to school for. I can ask for something in a stream that's in demand.
Mm-hmm.
CRS scores with regards to PR pathways. What's a CRS score, Elizabeth?
CRS scores are scores that deal with that are the express entry scores.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good to know.
How to get jobs easily. Correct. This is all
Yes.
Devant. These are more
Yeah, this is why we're here. So I should
Mhm.
mention, for those of you who are still on the call, on February the 22nd, we are offering a virtual hiring event. We have, close to 10 employers participating. It's a super screen day. We do have employers in the STEM areas who are looking to meet with you. So please register on our website, www.devant.ca. And we will also be offering a prep session on February 21st. This is all free of charge for you. Okay, nothing much. So we answered everything for one student here. That's great news.
Fantastic.
Career-specific pathways to PR. So some more help on that, Elizabeth.
Mhm.
Wonderful. Okay. So love your feedback. Overall, how useful and applicable was this session in helping you understand the immigration changes for your work authorization? So please let us know, what you thought of the session, and share your feedback through Mentimeter. We'll definitely be using some of this feedback. Would love to continue supporting you through future sessions. So give you some time to add some comments there. Thank you so much for your time in sharing with us your feedback. I know that people are still filling it out. Just wanted to close this session. We are at right on time. Just to say to everyone that we are here to support you in working with your universities and colleges, to support you with your training and your development of your skills for you to secure a job. And as you can see from Elizabeth's session, it's even more important now to try to plan ahead to get those offers, and not just any job, but the right job. So please take a look on our website. There are a lot of free events. In addition to the Get Hired event on February 22nd, Elizabeth is hosting a follow-up on February 28th around the startup and entrepreneurship world. So please take a look at those events, and we hope to see you again. Elizabeth, as always, thank you so much for a great session today. It was very useful. And I'm going to take a note of some of the questions as well. And I know that students will be reaching out to you. So again, behalf on everyone here and behalf of Devant, just thank you so much for your continued partnership. And we really value your time. Thank you.
Well, thanks so much for having me here, guys. I know it's going to be tough going for a lot of you, but keep at it. I think if we look at who Canada needs, if we can't keep people like you in Canada, who can we need in Canada? You are definitely the group of people that is the top kinds of immigrants that we need in Canada. So please keep at it, and all the best for you. Okay? Take care, guys.
Bye.